fighting on too many fronts? Is it too many matches in Europe for players and fans? I could probably answer that question, but we'll have an amazing, esteemed panel for you, Gilberto, Silva and Nedum as well, to come up on stage. But Mayur, he is the host and the moderator of this panel, so I'm going to introduce him onto the stage. Make sure you make our guests feel welcome by giving us a quiet, well, no, let's do a loud round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayur.
Cheers. Enjoy.
Perfect. An importing topic, if there ever was one at the moment. Plenty in the last 48 hours about this as well. And delighted to have two of the Premier League's finest with us. Both of you.
He's the man.
He's an invincible. Look, I think there's only, I guess, let's answer the question first off. Is there too much football?
From which perspective?
Well, let's start from the player's perspective first, and we'll get to the fans' side of it.
From the conversations I have with players involved in the game today, I've yet to come across one that says they need more games. I think most people tend to fall in line with, you know, this is a lot, I am tired. But then again, from the player's perspective, you're reluctant to say it's too much, because from when you say it's too much, you might be taken out and you might be perceived to be somebody who doesn't want to take part. And I don't think that's necessarily fair, so I think some of this argument kind of falls on deaf ears in some ways. And it's a lot of football, and it feels like there's even more coming. But how do you address that when realistically you're not the person that's in control of creating those games or being selected as well?
Gilberto, are the authorities listening to the players?
Well, you know, Nedum said something very interesting, because I think when we talk about, you know, there are many games, where, and which league, which country, which continent. Because when we see what's going on here in Europe, you know, if the number of competitions have been created, maybe on this perspective, or maybe us, but it's not for every club. It's not for every player. Even some players in the squads, when, for example, the bigger clubs, when they play most of this competition, not all of them play enough games during the season, because they are going to stay on the bench, not going to compete, despite the fact they have to train. But coming back, you know, let's say to South America, we have a big problem regarding the calendar, because of many clubs, they don't play not even enough games during the year. Some of them play 3 months, some of them play 4 months, some of them play 6 months, and out of the game afterwards. What does that create? A big problem in the system, in the ecosystem, because what they are going to do later on, the rest of the season. I think we have to evaluate this, you know, split this in parts. Some clubs, they have maybe enough games, some players in this group also, but the rest, and if you look in the world, we have to think very careful in how we put this into words.
Yeah, I think that level of nuance is something that is key here, because say, for example, if I also talk about the Premier League, you could talk about the people who are playing for Man City's, Liverpool's, Arsenal's. These are full internationals. So they will play more games than somebody who's, say, middle of the Premier League. Again, still one of the biggest leagues in the world. But if they, for example, have their 38 league game season and they're not an international player, and they get knocked out in the first round of both cup competitions, then the cap is 40 games. But I think the other side of that is, and this is where the issue comes, for somebody else, they're playing 60 games for their club, and they're playing 10 plus games for their national side. So even though they are classed as being the same person, they're having very different experiences. One's almost playing double the amount of football that someone else is. And again, in the Premier League, if you are somebody who's not international, you take joy because you play once a week. It's Saturday, it's Saturday. You're off on Sunday, you're off on Wednesday. Whereas for some of these other guys, it's Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday, Wednesday. And then even the idea and the wording of the international break. Who's taking a break when your flight is taking you to your next place to play in 2 games for your national side with like an end goal of maybe qualifying for a World Cup? So I think the conversation is, it's not as simple as, say, anybody makes it out to be, but then who do you speak to if you want to say it's too much, or who do you speak to, as Gilberto says, when you want to say that it's not enough?
I guess the follow-up to that then is there a disconnect between club executives and the actual people on the touchline and the people on the pitch?
Club executives.
I mean, I guess from a club perspective, it's about growing revenues, and we'll come to the new Club World Cup and various things in a second.
I think, I personally don't believe so, and I don't know if Gilberto would agree, but if you play for a club and you know the director knows you as a human being, and they'll see every game that you play, so they'll be able to see the ups and the downs, the physical highs, the emotional lows, all that stuff. So I don't think they're necessarily seeking to give you more games. Obviously, revenue and stuff matters, but they're not trying to do it at your expense. Whereas I think elsewhere, everybody has their own jobs to do, whether it's FIFA, UEFA, the FA, EFL, fine. And they don't know the players on that personal level to know everything that they're going through. But I think everybody that is a stakeholder for a particular football club will take into account how those players are feeling and what it looks like for them to be playing every 2-3 days.
I've seen a handful of players have commented on the extra games, and Rafael Varane called it dangerous in a tweet. Bernardo Silva said more games will mean loss of speed and intensity and more injuries. When it starts harming the product, is that when it starts becoming a problem, Gilberto?
If harm the product, yes, but we are talking about those two players. They played the most of the games in the season. As you know, it's very controversial subject for us to talk, because you see Man City and United and other clubs around the world, especially in the Premier League, they have so many games. And the task for all of us, who are part of the ecosystem, how can we balance that in order to protect the players' health, mental health, and but also have a good product for the fans, for the views. We have to think in every aspect, because you cannot think about generate revenue, but in the end of the day, somehow you kill the players on the field. They have to play so many games. But where is the balance of that? How can we together find a solution? Because this is a long conversation, and we have to look the picture not only here in Europe, because there are all this competition. FIFA has created a new competition, and there was another one from UEFA in the last few years. And when is next?
Well, let's come to that then. So next season, 2025, we'll have the new FIFA Club World Cup. So it'll go from the 8-team tournament to a 32-team tournament, and taking place in the United States. The Champions League will add extra match days, going into the Swiss format, or Swiss-style format. And you've got the UEFA Nations League. So we're now getting to the point where UEFA and FIFA are adding more games to what is already a congested calendar in Europe. And there was a really fascinating sort of stat I read. Potentially, Julian Alvarez next season could play 86 club games if Man City, plays, wins the FA Cup, wins the Champions League. 86 games, that's a lot.
That's a lot of football. I'm tired thinking about it. It's not... On paper, it's an incredible amount. And I think if you think about every single one of those games, it becomes harder. Because the games themselves, every game is different. But every game has a physical output. And I think the toll that gets forgotten about sometimes in my perspective, after a game, a team has won. If it's the favourite that's won, everyone's like, of course they won. And, it's at no cost. They're going to go and win the next game. But from every game you play, you walk off the field and you're tired. You might not be as tired as you'll feel in a week's time, in a month's time, towards the end of the season, but you're tired. And that tiredness will carry over and carry over and carry over. And at some point, people would like to have a break, but the ones at the very, very top, they don't really have time for that. I think the general idea is that at the end of a season, for some players, before they go back to their club side, they'll get 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, hurrah, 3 weeks. That's amazing. And it's 3 weeks for them to mentally and physically recover to go right back into it again. And it's very, very tough. But the competitions you mentioned, you're talking about a FIFA one, you're talking about a UEFA national one and a UEFA club one. So it's different groups of people with their games. if there was something that was more centralized, maybe all that would be taken into account. But as Gilberto keeps saying, which I think is a great point, the conversation goes beyond a European bias. Even the timing of the tournament in June and July, it sounds ludicrous from a European standpoint, but how about the leagues which run from January through to November? So we say, well, maybe we should change it, or should it be changed to favor you?
Well, we had that with the Qatar World Cup, didn't we?
Exactly. I think it's a great topic, and as Gilberto says, there's a really long conversation that could be had with this. But firstly, who sits at the table and how does it finish? Because it feels like this is the direction that we're going to, and you can't think of a point where everything will change and maybe we'll start getting rid of games. The players will do their best, but in the long term, the players will suffer. Because the 86 games, as you mentioned, I think realistically for some people, that's a career's worth of games. But instead, in the space of just 12 months, that could be something for Julian Alvarez.
And we then get to a point where, as you say, FIFA have started adding more games, UEFA has started adding more games, the leagues are trying to fight back. Obviously, there was sure many people in here will have seen, there was a event in London yesterday with FIFA Pro, and Richard Masters, the Premier League's chief executive and La Liga's president, threatened legal action and threatened to pull the Spanish and English teams out of the new Club World Cup. Are we just seeing Gilberto, are we seeing a ramping up of tensions here?
Well, I think the leagues, they are trying to protect the players and their product as well. Because as long if they feel that the players are going to play so many games, it's quite impossible if you play all these numbers of games to perform well in every game. This is quite insane. You talk about you were tired about just here, my knee just started to crumble. And but it's like as you said before, who sat down on the table to have this discussion with FIFA, UEFA, and just to see the other side for the players? Because you have to see the whole picture, for the players who play a lot of games, for the players who doesn't play enough games. And the hardest thing I see in all this scenario is just how can we balance that? Because Alvarez can maybe play potentially 86 games, but possibly Manchester City, they have condition to have more players in their squads. Maybe other clubs, they don't. They cannot have more than 30 players. Because if you have to play this number of games, during the season, you have to add more players on the team. It's going to be expensive, but maybe it's going to work financially for them to be in all this competition to host this number of players in their squad. This is what I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And also in regards to that, as a football fan, you'd like to see your team put out the best players that they can for every game, even though you know that maybe they're tired. And I think this is even more so the case in the second half of the season, when you know every game could be the difference between you being successful or not. Yeah. But unfortunately, as I say, I don't know, I think we'll obviously talk about the fan perspective as such, but it's tough because when a player says that they are tired, like Rodri for Man City said he was tired last season, and he sort of raised a few eyebrows and he says, I feel really bad for him, but just make sure you're ready for the game on Saturday because it's a big game, you need to play well.
Some more numbers. Jude Bellingham has played 30 more minutes of competitive football by his 20th birthday than Wayne Rooney had at the same age. The one that really got me is Kylian Mbappe, 24. He's played 26,952 minutes. That's 48% more minutes than Thierry Henry at the same age.
Yeah, it's a lot of football. I think, as we talk about this conversation, we're talking about the 1%. But just because they're the 1% doesn't mean that what they're going through should be ignored. Because I think it really does matter. And I think if we want to be in a position where people want to protect the product, like those guys are essentially some of the reasons why people go to games, because they want to see the very best. They want to see a Bellingham. They want to see an Mbappe. They want to see others like that. And if these guys aren't able to perform to their best, well, we ask the question why. And if it's because we've demanded too much from them, then maybe we're in the wrong.
And sometimes it's He's forget these are people, they're not robots.
Who forgets?
Well, is it the governing bodies?
No, they know who they are. They get the shirt sold and all that stuff, you know. I think the human element for me within football is a side which is easily forgotten because we see them for 90 minutes every few days. We don't see the feelings and stuff that they have afterwards, like as I was saying to Gilberto. Like, even if you play in a game which is quote-unquote perceived to be easy, you still feel the physical toll because you had to work hard to make it easy. So you will need to recover 4 days afterwards. And this happening 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 times in a season, it's really hard physically. But then there's also the mental side of things, to be pushing at that level all the time. And there is a human side of things that is there. And the moment you see somebody and you get a chance to interact with somebody who does it, then all of a sudden you have more sympathy. You can gain a sense of empathy towards them. But access is so low from that standpoint, and that's not the thing that sells or engages or gets clicks. That all you want realistically is to see your team walk out, do well, win, and then you can get excited for the next game to come. So I think the human element is forgotten about. But lo and behold, the ones who speak up for the players the most are the ones who know them, who see them, and they see them on a day-to-day basis.
The PFA have had their say. Maheta Malongo, the boss of the PFA, said FIFA is killing the game and football is ruining its own product. Do you agree with that, Gilberto?
Well, it's his tough words, you know, from his side. But
he's blaming
listen,
FIFA.
I'm not say that he's right or wrong, but he has his say because he's on the player side. You know, look to the players, to their health. But as Nedum said, there is a physical aspect of it. The quality of the game decrease for these players, this 1%. There is any way where we can think about how we increase the number of games for the teams who doesn't play enough to have a good balance. If there is any way, how can we make this possible? You know, to be good for the other players, other clubs, to generate more revenue and be financially interesting for everyone. Because then at some point you just think about the clubs at the top of the pyramid, and to have a nice product because of the names, the attraction they got from a sponsor point of view. But below that, those clubs need some attention to. Those players need attention to. Those clubs need to generate something for them, some of them to survive. And if we find a way where we balance this, would be the perfect scenario, but a better scenario. But you cannot always think about the top of it, and at some point take the risk of create damage to those players who has to play a lot, performing every 2-3 days, and but the mental side, as Nathan said, I think this is very concerned because we don't know when the players finish the game, they have their families, they have problems as well. They need a rest to think about how they adjust their lives according to the number of games they have to play, according to the numbers of time they need to be away from family, from home, how they understand that on their minds. And you create a tough schedule for them to manage by themselves. At the end of the day, the player ends up alone most of the time because he has to perform. Sometimes things work well, sometimes doesn't. It's part of the game. But who is there on the side of the player when things go wrong? Who is there to help him when he's depressed, when he's sad, when he cries alone without telling anybody, when a member of his family passed away, have any problem, but he has to perform again. And he has so many games. How he deal with that? Who help him? I think they will have to think about all the scenario, all the possibilities I don't want them to kill their ideas, but how we create this competition without create a problem for the players. physical and mental health.
So I agree with everything you just said there, and I'm trying my best not to be cynical about certain things.
Yeah.
But I think with some bosses, they say the right thing, but their objectives are still different. Because realistically, like, to get ahead of it, the perspective of a player is where for me, playing football is the best job in the world. And it's one that comes with some of the best pay in the world as well. But your focus is still playing football. Whereas I think from some of the other side of things, like the people associated, for example, just to make it specific to the Premier League, they want to protect the Premier League because they want to attach themselves to the 1% and say, look at our product. This is how great everything is. It's the reason why, the teams up near the top are on TV more often than teams down near the bottom. This is our product, this is our product. And the teams who are lower down in the league, they'll play their 38 games, the same as the team up top. But most people won't see them unless they've got direct link to them. And again, you don't want to, as Gilberto says, you don't want to just squash ideas, just get rid of people's ideas. But how many people that say they care about the players are saying it because they care about the players, or are they saying it because they care about what they want to offer to be able to bring themselves more money? And again, players do get money as such, but at what cost? Because their cost is very different to the person who wants to put the games on.
Where's the breaking point on this? Could players strike?
With all due respect, the only union that I was a part of, which was in solidarity more often than not, was in MLS, where the game is very different to what it's like in Europe anyway. But over here, it's not the same. You talk about the PFA, and I'd imagine if you ask a lot of players in England who the head of the PFA was, they might not be able to say. If they ask, how do you get in contact, they might not be able to say. So it's not something whereby they can all come together as such in a more organized manner and really be able to make a point. I think the more that, well, I'll be honest, big name players have said it's too much, yet still here we are. And they've been saying it for 2-3 years. So how does it change? I think it's realization that for these guys, they do the best that they can, and they neither want to say to their club that they're tired and they can't play, nor do they want to say to their nation, I'm tired, I can't play either, because these are two huge bits of their identity. So I don't think they come together like that, because I still don't believe they have enough power, even if they do.
To give it some balance, there is someone apart from Gianni Infantino who likes the Club World Cup. The PSG boss, the ECA chairman, I think, Nasser Al-Khelaifi, said it will be bigger than the National Team World Cup. So there is someone who sees a positive in it.
Bigger than the World Cup?
Yeah, he thinks the 32-team FIFA Club World Cup could well become bigger than the National Team World Cup. Everyone's in agreement then?
It's not to say that it can't become big, but that's a very, very big statement, considering was that the most viewed thing or sport in the world. Obviously, it has potential, and I think I admire people who can be visionaries to see something further down the road. But it's a tough sell to say it to people before it's even started. Yeah. Especially given some of the issues that people have with it at this moment in time, to do with the timing of it for some, or say the player welfare side of things. Like, realistically, for a tournament next season that goes on between June and July, if your team is based in Europe on like a more, or I can't say traditional, but the August through to May calendar, what team do you think they'll be able to put out at the end of a season after international games for a month for a wraparound season? It's probably not going to be the team that you'd hope that they would. So how does it become the biggest thing in football? I'm not sure.
Gilberto, I guess it gives some of the smaller teams from around the world that opportunity to play the giants. So I guess there is some positive in a tournament like this.
Oh, for those clubs, those small clubs, I'm not going to say small club. For those clubs, it's a great opportunity, of course. And some of them, coming from South America, I understand quite well how important it is. I remember, when I was playing Brazil, every year when the Brazilian clubs play Copa Libertadores, it's for us there, it's like Champions League here. The winner have the possibility to play against the European club somewhere. Before was in Japan, they changed the place, but this means a lot. It's like when you go to the World Cup in this tournament, but you have one opportunity to go to the final if you win the Copa Libertadores. And sometimes depends the opponents you play. You don't have a good game. You have to travel far to whenever they have to play, and it's very challenging. But now there looks like there are going to be more clubs, more opportunities for them. This is great, but I'd love to have more opportunity for many other clubs on their condition also, because then you create opportunities for more to maybe at some point expose themselves, to be seen by people, sometime generate business, because this is how many of them survive in South America. And this is a great prize. To be there for them is a great prize, great moments for them. But for some, it's not only that what they need something else more. But the question now, as we discussed before, we are going to keep discussing it. How can we create a balance? Without say to the decision makers, they are wrong in the way they are doing things. But we have to find the good balance for the top of the pyramid, for the middle, and for the ones who are in the lower level, compared to what they want to create as a product.
Nedum, are we just going to go around in circles with this? I mean, this came up again in the mid-2000s, didn't it, when there was the second group in the Champions League. Remember, there used to be 2 group stages, and that added more games. Here we are again with more games. Is it just something that will go round and round and it will get forgotten about next week?
I thought you were going to talk about us just going around in circles on this panel. Yes, absolutely. I guess so. I think football itself, to me, feels quite conservative in nature, to where we don't really like change. And when change comes and you can think of the expense, then all of a sudden you're not really as interested or engaged anymore. And you think it has to stop. I think through the years we've seen that football has changed a lot in terms of, say, the way it's being played, the way it's being run, the way that, there are games here, there, and everywhere. So we'll probably end up revisiting this conversation again, unless somebody or something breaks. And for the way that football is, people are doing everything they can to make sure that it doesn't break. And so you can mask over some real significant issues and move forward with things. And it's not to say that the Club World Cup, sorry, what's it called next year? The FIFA Club World Cup. The FIFA Club World Cup next year could be a huge success. But say, for example, its growth will be dependent on the approaches that people take when they go to it. And as you've mentioned, as Gilberto's mentioned, and as I acknowledge myself, the way one tournament looks to one is very different at times to how it looks to another. For the Club World Cup that Man City played in last winter, I think they played against Fluminense, and they were talking about how big a moment it is for the South American sides to play in the Club World Cup, what it would mean for them to win one. And then after Manchester City won it, most people who I would speak to, they say, who cares about the Club World Cup? So you're in a funny position with things which not everybody gets a chance to play in. So I think we will come round to this conversation again, but you just hope that it doesn't get to a point where the standard and expectation is that there'll be some players who will play 70, 80 games every season. There's nothing they can say about it, nothing they can do about it, because at some point, as I say, I think there'll be a cost there which they'll never be able to recover.
Okay, let's switch to the fan side of it, because I think we could talk about the actual player and business side of it forever. As a fan, does the expanded football calendar excite you?
If I could answer this one. So, me personally, I'll hold my hands up. As far as watching football goes, I'm a psycho. I watch all football everywhere, all the time. So the expanded football calendar, for me, is like a dream come true. If I can turn my TV on or put my phone on and see football, I will watch it, whether it's, say, the World Cup final or a Sunday League football final. I'm all in. I love it. But I know that I'm not necessarily the norm. I think a lot of fans, I don't know if you would agree, Gilberto, but a lot of fans don't love football, they love their team. And when it's love of your team, it doesn't matter what the other game is on TV, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be excited about it. say the Champions League tomorrow between Real Madrid and Borussia Dortmund. I cannot wait to watch that game. But the game might not get as many viewers as if it was, say, maybe an FA Cup final domestically, if their team was playing. So I love it, but I know that's a very selfish mindset to have, because I know there are some players who are suffering, who are toiling to play in as many games as possible. I'm probably going to watch every game at the Euros. I'm going to watch every game in the league, every game at the Club World Cup next year. But I know that I shouldn't. And I think we're in a very fortunate position where if you have access to games anyway, if you decide that a game's too much, you just don't watch it. Yeah. So you can curate your own viewing. Whereas I think from the other side of it, player-wise, you still have to play in the game even if nobody's watching. So I think as a fan, I don't know if, as I say, if people would agree, I never think it's too much because I can decide when to stop and when to get back into it. And for me, unfortunately, there is no stopping because if it's available, I will be watching, yeah.
Gilberto?
Well, I think you can see on a different way. You know, you love it. Of course, the fans who love their clubs, they enjoy a lot, you know, to see their friends again. But on the other hand, how expensive it's going to be for them also. There is a cost of, you know, if you add, I don't know, 10, 20, 15 more games during the season. For some people, maybe it's okay. Maybe for some people, it's going to be okay. I need to balance my pocket here. How can I manage this game? You know, but on an entertainment point of view, I believe that for the fans, they enjoy it because they want to. Because nowadays, what I have seen many occasions that for the clubs, they don't only sell their tickets for the local fans, but fans who come abroad. Some of them they come twice a week, a year, for example, or 4 times. Some people they are just tourists. They want to watch some games, and if they go somewhere, let's say if I come here the next season to Amsterdam, the first thing as a football fan, I'll watch who's going to play. I'm Amsterdam. Let's see if there is any game. If I have an opportunity to buy a ticket, I'll go. But for the local fans, you know, who are here every game, you know, some of them may think, oh wow, it's going to be nice, but quite expensive too. But in the end of the day, most of them are going to make a sacrifice to be here in the stadium. It's a nice environment to be.
I would agree. And I think Gilberto was very, very good at adding nuance to any conversation because there's so many other perspectives which at times, you know, we don't think about. And I think that one of a fan who's spending money to go and support their team, I think a lot of these people, realistically, they can't afford it. But as I was reminded of in a panel that was here before, it's their identity. So it's very hard to turn your back on. And I learned this lesson myself when I was lucky to be working at the World Cup in Qatar 2 years ago. And it felt strange to see thousands of Argentinians just walking around for weeks at a time. But there was no other place on earth that they would rather be than to be there watching their team play. So from a cost standpoint, everyone will have a breaking point at some stage. But from a sheer desire standpoint, they want to be there because they feel they have to be there, some of them, because that's who they are. And if people exploit that, I think that's a negative thing. But I think if you give people a chance to watch their team again, where cost isn't the biggest issue, then I think they'll do it.
Let me add something. I remember when Corinthians, you know, won the Libertadores, they went to play. I forgot who they play against. I think it was Chelsea. There was fans. Oh?
Yeah, Club World Cup in
Exactly.
Yokohama.
There was some fans. They sold their house to come to the games, just for you to have an idea how passionate people are for the love of their clubs. You know, they do everything. And in 2013, I was at Atlético Mineiro. We went to Morocco to play the Club World Cup, and it was tough for some of the fans because some of them, in the day we were playing our first match against Raja Casablanca, they were flying to Morocco, and we lost that game. Some of them, you know, borrow money from the bank. Some of them sold the car. And this, for us, you know, to evaluate how important football is for those people. You know, they are very passionate. They do everything they can. when we talk about, I brought the expenses of increase the number of game and on the pockets of the funds, just for us to have different ideas from different cultures. How does it mean, and how is the perception according to European culture, South America, Asia, Latin America, United States, everyone have, let's say, the way of how they support the fun and how they do things in order to watch the games.
Do fans get listened to enough?
You're asking us.
Yeah.
Listened to by the football club, by the
club,
governing
the
bodies.
broadcasters, more games. Let's take the Premier League as a good example. New deal kicks in next year, more games than ever before. Means later kickoffs in some cases.
That's a really good question. It's a really, really good question.
Because let's go back a couple of years. COVID's happened. Every club tried to, and the Super League happened and all the rest of it. And every club tried to tell us, fans, how important they were and how much we care about you and, we wouldn't let you down. But did they get listened to enough?
Probably not overall, but I think it's from a place where I think at times some forget that football is also a business and they will listen to you, but not at a great expense, it feels like. But then also, again, as Gilberto said, like a fan of a football club goes beyond people who live within, say, 10 miles of it these days. And there are other people out there who've got different needs, different wants, different desires as well, who also deserve to be listened to. So I think the scale that football is growing is putting us in a position whereby there are probably more perspectives than, say, one unified one of people who are from a particular place. And so people do listen, but they've got more people to listen to. And the things that are generally, that I feel people complain about tend to be financial. And then that goes again to the fact that football is a business, and realistically, people aren't going to be prepared to be cutting down on potential revenues to suit the needs of, say, the individual fan. And that is, I'm sure that doesn't feel great at all. But I think from when we really take a look at what football is, like, which way is it going to go from there? It's never going to go backwards. It's only going to try and steam forward, I believe.
Let's wrap this up then. We're almost running out of time. Where does all of this end?
This panel.
Well, this panel maybe as well, but no, generally, this merry-go-round. In games, fans, there's so much going on. Does this end, or will we be doing Soccer X next year? And I'm sure there'll be a panel about this again.
If you have me again, I'll do it next year. I think the only way it ends is if certain groups of people are heard, but I don't think it'll be heard just due to the general direction that football's going in. I think I mentioned before about how the heads of, say, FIFA, UEFA, Premier League, and so on, like, they do care to a certain extent, but their jobs require something else. And I think when it comes down to topics like this, it's very easy to read the room and try and say the right thing. But the doing of the right thing for the greater good at times isn't something that put them in their position or put football where it is today. So I think it only changes when people within the game break. But I don't think people have any intention of breaking. And I think it's going to be a shame because maybe in 5, 6, 7 years' time, we'll see what this time has meant to those younger players. But for now, people are going to try and squeeze out every last drop that you can find from some of the best players in the world in what, for me, is the best sport in the world as well.
Gilberto, final thoughts from you?
This is going to be, I believe, a long conversation until we find a good balance of probably the next edition of Soccer X we are going to be discussing again. But it's an important question. We must say that it's an important question because, as Nedum said, on the football clubs and the football association like FIFA, UEFA, Premier League, whatever federation, is their business. This is what they try to do in order to create a good product, to create a good entertainment for people. And as long people buy, they'll keep doing it. And because it's, somehow there is a metric for them, to achieve things in terms of results, financial results. And if the financial result is good, for some of them, understand that it's quite good. I think what they cannot lose is the perception of understand the player's side. Don't forget the players. Okay, they can create any product they like, but as long they don't neglect the importance of take care of the human being who plays football. Because this person is important because in few years' time, he's not going to play anymore, and another one will come. And this person who retires today, what's their physical and mental condition when he stops? Because when you are playing, it's beautiful. Everybody loves you. Everybody recognizes you. Everybody wants to take a picture. But listen, people don't know how tough it is when the curtain closes for the players. For me, it's like this interrogation on the player's mind, on the player's future, what he's going to do, if he got a bad injury, if he got a mental problem, or something else. I think we have to build things. For the business point of view, it's great, but you cannot neglect the human being who play football, is the athletes. Because everyone is important in this ecosystem. The clubs, the federation, they are important because they organize things, they host the player, they generate the business. The players are important because without players you don't have football. But also the fans is important because they consume it, and sometimes it can be so expensive for them. Maybe a long time ago we could say that football was a popular sport. Not anymore. It became so expensive for most of the people, even to watch on TV. The average people cannot pay, on satellite, a good to watch their team. They need to go somewhere else to share with other people on a public space. I think we can create anything they want, but think about everyone to be part of it and enjoy, and don't neglect the players.
Gents, good way to finish. Plenty to think about. Gilberto, thank you. Nedum, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.